Well, welcome everyone to another edition of Good Morning Cannabis. I have a good friend of mine and my partner, Steve Press, who's going to share with you some information that you really should and need to know, especially if you're planning on eventually selling your cannabis company, because you could save a buku amount of money on taxes. You can save money on taxes if you follow this suggestion. So, Steve, welcome to the program. And Steve, tell the audience a little bit about yourself before we get into the actual discussion.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Todd. Happy to be here. I joined Sax at the tail end of last year, and my practice is predominantly focused on working with early employees, founders of predominantly venture-backed businesses, but helping folks plan into exits and tax saving strategies that they can use up front before those exits.
Great.
One of the big ones there is 1202 or QSBS.
Awesome, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, Steve, if I'm a company, a cannabis company, and a lot of our clients right now are in the startup stage, but they're planning on selling in the future, what are some things that they need to understand about 1202? Sounds like a pretty ominous number there. I don't know why they picked 1202. And how can they ensure that they can take advantage of it going into the future? So I'm going to just pass it right on to you, and you can kind of teach this whole audience the basics and also some of the specific requirements.
So I think 1202 is probably one of the most powerful yet underutilized aspects of the tax code. So if certain requirements are met by both the company and the shareholder, it can provide for an exclusion of gain up to $10 million or 10 times your cost basis, and the greater of those two. So really, with some good planning, it can provide for a massive tax benefit at a liquidity event. So at a really high level, what needs to be done to qualify for this tax benefit? And the first piece is you need to have a domestic C corporation. So the stock you hold needs to be C Corp stock in a domestic C Corp. Second, that stock has to be at original issuance. So you can't have purchased that from somebody else. You need to have received that stock for cash or performance of services there. Next, you want to think about that stock having been issued after 1993. But when we really think about a exclusion of gain or 100% exclusion of gain, we're looking at stock that was issued after 2010. So any new companies that are being formed, we're really planning into that 100% exclusion of gain benefit. I think the next one that I think a lot of people, when they look at QSBS online, is gross assets of $50 million. So thinking about what the gross assets of the business are when you receive your shares of stock. So when you're issued that stock, that the gross assets are 50 million or less. And then I think the next biggest piece when we're planning into these exits is you need to have held that stock for 5 years. So, you know, those to me are the big tests that I think we can monitor. And then there's some more nuanced aspects, but I think that's on a case-by-case basis.
Is there any considerations if you're a cannabis company? Because I know that we all know that cannabis companies are under the federal law actually considered drug traffickers. But what considerations do you need to take into account if you fall under 280E, and is that a concern?
Yeah, I think it's a concern or a data point here. There's been no specific guidance on 1202 and how it would apply to the cannabis space. But generally, 280E says that it's a denial of a deduction or credit, where 1202 provides for an exclusion of gain. And I think there's a discrete difference between those two, and 1202 would apply here to the cannabis space. Within 1202, we have to meet certain trade or business requirements, and professional services, businesses in the finance sector, and specifically farming are excluded from 1202. So I think when we think about the cannabis space, we want to think about what what businesses are engaged in farming activities and what businesses are not engaged in farming activities. And I think, as we know, there's a myriad in between there as well.
Right. So it's potentially not advantageous to cultivators, would we say?
Yeah, I would say if you're touching the dirt or the plants, you're probably not going to be eligible for 1202 there. Whereas, if you're in a more gray business, which is strain development or maybe related to irrigation or packaging, things like that, that it may be a question mark that would really require a detailed analysis of the business operations and what they're actually engaged in. Whereas I think we can comfortably say you're probably eligible for an exclusion of gain under 1202 if you're processing and manufacturing into finished goods there. So, looking at really what the operations of each business are and going from there.
So selling the product, retail stores are going to have a problem with that.
Yeah, on the surface, I would say no.
Right. But obviously, I mean, what you're bringing up is that when you're planning to follow 1202, you really need to consult folks like us to do the planning, because it is something that you need to kind of set up prior to that 5-year period.
100%. And I think it's how do we work with our clients on understanding what their business structure is, what their long-term plan is, and then we can help them set their business up in the most tax efficient manner based on their goals and objectives. So if they maybe have a cultivation aspect of their business and they also have a brick and mortar aspect of their business, how do we help them optimize for both aspects there?
Right. Any other advice concerning 1202 that you want to give to the audience?
So I think 1202 is I said in the beginning, probably the most underutilized and powerful aspect of the code section. I think there's opportunities for investors who maybe don't meet that 5-year holding period to take into consideration how 1045 rollovers can allow them to invest those good QSBS dollars into other QSBS eligible businesses. So I think we can assist with the planning there, even though if you haven't met that 5-year holding period. And I also think from a estate tax planning standpoint, so how can we stack QSBS into multiple $10 million buckets or 10 times cost basis buckets, that it can be powerful outside of just individual income tax planning.
Excellent. So Steve, this has been really helpful. I know it's brief, but it's helpful for people to start thinking about this. If folks wanted to reach out to you or contact you for additional questions, or obviously to engage us, what is the best way for them to reach you?
I think email is the best way. Can be reached at spress@saxllp.com. So spress@saxllp.com.
Excellent. So Steve, with that, I'm making this rather short, but I think it's short and sweet. Just want to thank you for being a guest on the show, and I will be seeing you around. And for those people who are listening, Steve Press, you're looking to save some money on some taxes, Steve is the man to talk to, and happy to connect you with him at any point in time. And with that, Steve, just bidding you adieu and hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Todd. This was great.
Take care.